All right, let's jump right into this explainer and talk about Wilhelm Steinitz. This is the guy who literally rewired the physics of the chessboard. You know, when we think of brilliant minds who completely change a discipline, we usually picture scientists or philosophers, right? But today we're zooming in on the architect of modern chess strategy. Seriously, if you've ever played a game or even just watched a stream, the way you see the board, that's directly because of this one man.
So to really grasp his massive impact, we first have to look backwards. We gotta ask how this mid-19th century game, which was full of these wild, crazy sacrifices, evolved into a battle of pure logic. Picture the chess world back in the 1850s. It wasn't this quiet, hyper-calculated game we imagine today. No way. It was daring. It was reckless. It was all about raw aggression, where players would just throw pieces across the board, hoping to land this chaotic, spectacular knockout punch. Think of it less like a modern Grandmaster tournament and, well, more like a tactical barroom brawl. Someone had to step in and bring order to that absolute chaos.
And this really perfectly illustrates that massive paradigm shift. We're talking about moving from the chaotic, reckless, romantic era to the calculated, scientific positional play that Steinitz pioneered. Look, romantic chess was thrilling, sure, but it was fundamentally unstable. It relied almost entirely on making wild sacrifices and basically just crossing your fingers that your opponent would blunder. Steinitz looked at all that chaos and said, nope, there's a science to this. He didn't just want to win games, he wanted to solve the board using logic, center control, and reliable, repeatable strategy. He essentially wanted to kill the romantic style entirely.
Okay, Section 1, the Austrian Morphy, from Prague to Vienna. So born in Prague in 1836, Steinitz eventually makes his way to Vienna, where he just absolutely dominated the local chess scene. But here's the wild twist. Early on, he was actually incredibly good at those exact sharp, aggressive tactical strikes. He was so good, in fact, that the local scene dubbed him the Austrian Morphy. You know, named after Paul Morphy, who was like the ultimate icon of that attacking romantic style. Steinitz was beating them at their own game. He proved he could brawl with the absolute best of them, which honestly makes what he did next so incredibly revolutionary.
Moving on to Section 2, Scientific Revolution, a New Philosophy.
This is where Steinitz fundamentally changed the physics of the board. He introduced positional play, proving that you could force a win without ever needing a lucky, desperate attack. Positional play basically means you're playing the long game. You're not just sacrificing your queen for a quick thrill anymore. Instead, you're looking at the underlying geometry of the board. You're controlling space. And this is huge because it took chess from being a game of chance and raw tactical flair and turned it into a rigorous discipline of spatial control and extreme patience.
So, the main takeaway here is that his brand new system relied entirely on three core scientific tenets. First, controlling the center. Second, maintaining a sound pawn structure. And third, patiently accumulating small advantages. If you want a golden rule from this explainer to actually apply to your own strategic thinking, this is it. By holding the center, keeping your pawns defensively sound, and just slowly stacking up tiny, incremental wins, a victory becomes a mathematical certainty. You don't need luck anymore. You just need a system.
Now, naturally, the rest of the chess world initially mocked these theories as boring and overly mathematical. They literally thought his slow, methodical approach was cowardly compared to those flashy, romantic attacks of the past. But, the mockery didn't last very long. Why? Well, because Steinitz backed up his theories by brutally crushing anyone who stood in his way. He proved game after game that logic beats recklessness every single time. And suddenly, all his loudest critics realized they either had to adapt to this new scientific reality or get completely left behind.
Which brings us to Section 3, First World Champion, Absolute Dominance.
Things really kick into high gear in 1866 when he defeats Adolf Anderssen, who at the time was widely considered the world's absolute strongest player. From there, Steinitz goes on an absolute tear. He went undefeated in match play for over 30 years, from 1862 all the way to 1894. And right in the middle of that epic run, in 1886 he defeated Johannes Zukertort over in the United States in what's widely recognized as the very first official World Chess Championship.
He held an iron grip on that official title for 8 straight years. And he wasn't just sitting back on his throne either. He was actively, successfully defending his crown against top-tier international masters like Isidor Gunsberg and Mikhail Chigorin. He was the undeniable king of the board. Really, he was living proof that his scientific positional theories were just vastly superior to anything that had ever come before him. And even after his prime, his 1895 game against Kurt von Bardeleben serves as the ultimate Steinitz legacy. It is an absolute masterpiece. It perfectly blends his old tactical sharpness with his new positional genius. He systematically squeezed his opponent using those scientific tenets and then, right at the end, unleashed this spectacular combination that proved he still had that old Austrian Morphy fire burning inside him. It's really the perfect encapsulation of his entire life's work on the board.
All right, Section 4, the Grand Dilution, Tragedy and Downfall.
The legendary streak eventually had to break. After holding that top spot for decades, he finally lost his long-held title to Emanuel Lasker in 1894. Now, losing your life's defining achievement is incredibly hard for anyone, but for Steinitz, it triggered a devastating collapse. His life took a really dark turn into severe poverty and, even more tragically, profound mental instability. The brilliant mind that had literally solved the chaos of the chessboard began to succumb to chaos itself.
He became institutionalized in his later years and developed these grand, truly heartbreaking delusions. He famously started claiming to the people around him that he was communicating with and even playing chess against God, and he genuinely believed he was doing this via an invisible electrical telegraph. It's just a mythic, deeply tragic image, isn't it? The ultimate master of logic, now completely disconnected from reality, trying to checkmate the divine.
In 1900, institutionalized and impoverished, the father of modern chess passed away. And the age he died at is, well, it's almost too poetic to believe. He was exactly 64 years old. 64. That's the exact number of squares on the chessboard he had spent his entire life mastering. It's almost as if the parameters of the game itself defined the very boundaries of his existence.
It leaves us with this final, haunting thought about the true cost of his obsession. We really have to wonder if transforming a chaotic barroom brawl into a perfect, elegant science required him to sacrifice himself entirely to those 64 squares. Wilhelm Steinitz gave us the modern game of chess. He left behind a legacy of pure logic. But in the end, it seems the board took everything he had left to give.